Good afternoon. I'll now call the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee to order. Welcome to the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee. This meeting is being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. Today, we don't have any public meetings, open delegations, or any presentations. There's no standing items. And I will leave item number 5, referred items, to the end of our meeting. So our first thing would be a report of advisory committees. There's one advisory committee report to be received. 6.1, which is the report of the International Relations Committee dated December 5th, 2023. Can I have a member of committee put the report on the floor to be received? Deputy Mayor Thompson, thank you. Are there any questions from members of committee in regards to it? No? Any non-members of committee? No? Okay, and I'll then call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes. Then on to section 7, which is reports of officers of the corporation. Next, there's one report of officers of the corporation, 7.1, which is the 2023 Q4 internal audit status report, 2023 fraud and wrongdoing program activity, 2023 summary of internal audit activity, and 2024 internal audit work plan. So section 1 is that the 2023 Q4 internal audit status report be received as information. Section 2 is that the 2023 fraud and wrongdoing program activity be received as information. Section 3, that the 2023 summary of internal audit activity attached as Appendix C to the report to the Finance and Responsible Governance be dated today's date, be received as information. And section 4, that the 2024 internal audit work plan attached as Appendix D to the report to the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee dated today be approved. Does a member of the committee wish to put it on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Kunkel. And as the motion is on the floor, I'd like to move an amendment. So I was just wondering if I could get Deputy Mayor Thompson to take the chair for a few minutes.
Councillor Harvey, you have an amendment?
Yeah, thank you. The amendment that I have is that paragraph 4 be amended as follows. That the 2024 internal audit work plan attached as Appendix D to the report to the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee dated January 31st, 2024 be approved as amended to add value for money audit of the Barrie Public Library. And I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just obviously, there's been a lot of discussion at General Committee last week in regards to the budget, and it's not the first year that there's been some conversation around the Barrie Public Library's budget. And this is very much aligned with one of the amendments that came forward during the budget process when it comes to the county. And after having a good conversation with our Director of Audit in regards to not only her report, but also this specific subject, this is something that we can do in-house. And through the Municipal Act and also the Libraries Act, we do have the authority to audit the library. And this is not that the library is doing anything deceitful or anything like that, but it's really to look at, are we getting the appropriate value for the taxpayers' monies that are going there, because we're dealing with a $10 million budget. And obviously there's been some questions in regards to the ongoing budget requests and like, I mean, even last year I held their budget at 0%. They had more than enough funds in their reserve to make up that $258,000. And we just learned recently that they decided not to make up that $258,000 and somehow were able to go through the entire year less that $258,000 that was part of their original request. So it just kind of shines a light on the fact that we do need a review to see what the value for money is going on when it comes to our taxpayers' dollars, because they are basically fully funded by our taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Kunkel?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Deputy Robert Thompson, to Councillor Harvey and or to redirect the staff, but I'll start with you. So knowing that a board, just like any entity that has its own governors, the library board will go through its own audit at the fiscal year end, and we saw that in some of the back and forth. So just for sake of clarity around next steps, I think might also be helpful for the public and for us to be on the same page is, what do you find to be in scope of a value for money audit? I'm assuming that that is something that would be timed after their audit. So that's a point of information we're getting. And we're hearing this coming up a lot. So I know right now it's this is coming to this committee because it's tied to an internal audit. And I'm hearing you say that we can do this internally. But is there a cost associated with doing that audit, and who's covering the cost?
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. So actually, the reason it's being kept in-house is to save that funding. We have our own internal auditors, and through having a discussion with Ms. McGregor today, that this request is definitely something that they can fit into their 2024 plan and then be able to provide an update back to council prior to the 2025 budget process. Whereas when it came to the county, we had budgeted $50,000. You're dealing with a very different scope between the two of them. Going in and doing a value for money on the county is extremely involved. This is not so much as involved. And I don't know, and this is where I didn't want to tie them and tie their hands as to only go and look in this direction or that direction. Let them go in, do their review. It's a very different review than normal auditing, because normal auditing is not looking at the stuff that they would be looking at. They're just looking at appropriate accounting processes and making sure that they're following all the particular legislation when it comes to that. So this is very different, and that's why I didn't want to direct them as to how to conduct that. And through the discussions, that's why we've come up with this motion, so that way they can go in and be able to review as they see fit. And if they're looking at one area and they don't see anything, then they're going to start looking at other areas. Maybe there's nothing there. Maybe we have no concerns, but until we can get ourselves satisfied, along with our other service partners that obviously we had quite a deep discussion about, we need to put ourselves in a good position for 2025 budget. And that's why I've brought this forward, because I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. If I may, Ms. McGregor. Hi, hello. Sorry, you're behind me. Sorry if I can redirect a question. Could you provide any further information, I think, too, for the public, but also the scope of that? So, you know, while we've been back and forth with the library and other service providers, and we recognize different aspects at play. So different legislative acts, different ways in which reserves are utilized or accessed. How would you approach a value for money audit with a service provider like the Barrie Public Library?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Thompson, to Councillor Kungle. Thank you for the question. We certainly, again, as Councillor Harvey indicated, we're not looking to re-audit the financial statements of the library. Those are done by Deloitte, you know, every year, and that's not the intent. Those ensure that the financial statements are fairly represented in accordance with accounting principles. So this would be a different type of review, looking at value for money in terms of the funding that the city is providing to the library. So, you know, as you indicated, you know, after their 2023 audit is complete, that's a logical time to look at the numbers as they are after that time and establish a scope. And obviously we would have to have further conversations with council about that scope as things develop, but we would take a first look at things and make an assessment. But that is something that certainly with our in-house team that we could definitely work into this year as needed by council.
And in follow-up, there's been a lot of communication around budget time between providers and members of council. I'm not sure if you're privy to that or if that would be a good input to see the scope in which we've been asking questions of clarification, because I think in addition to an audit, I'll say, it seems to be there's a lot of education information back and forth about not comparing like service provider to a different service provider and how they function financially. So with that regard, are you aware of kind of the lens of information, or would any part of your recommendations or suggestions back lead into points of information for us to be aware of around how they may operate differently than what we might assume that they operate around their reserves?
Again, through you, Deputy Mayor Thompson, to Councillor Kungle, certainly we'll work with council to ensure that the scope, when it's established and formalized, will ultimately meet the needs of council and that it's appropriate. So we can work out those details. I don't have all the details of what that would look like exactly tonight. But certainly that's something, if approved as part of our work plan, that we would consult with council to ensure that the ultimate deliverable is going to meet your needs.
And last question, if I may, Ms. McGregor. While I'm hearing that it's going to fall into the scope of the 2024 practice, it's not coming at a cost, is what I'm hearing over and above. And is there any timeline that you're forecasting this to happen in? So I'm hoping we would have kind of the outcomes of that value for money audit before we're in deliberations around the budget, or asking that provider to come so it can inform conversations before the next budget cycle. And I know sometimes we start that around May, June. So is there a timeline you would be practicing that action in?
Again, Councillor Kungle, we can't commit to a specific timeframe tonight, certainly, but we understand that the target is to have the best information possible to council in advance of the finalization of the 2025 budget deliberations. So we'll certainly work towards that. And if we at any point have indications from our work that that timeline would be in jeopardy, we would advise immediately.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McGregor. Okay, I'm in support of the motion. I don't have any further comments on that specifically, other than it might be worth a broader conversation too as we go through the budget and other deliberations around. Seems like audit and value for money is becoming a regular theme. And so do we just take a blanket approach to say, is this a good time anyways, to look at why we're doing a value for money audit in some providers and not all? So is there a blanket approach that we almost want to take around what information we want to have at hand before the next budget cycle?
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. Mayor Nato.
Yeah, thank you. If you could just give me one moment, because I didn't actually realize we were going to get into this earlier meeting. And I do have a few things that I'd like to speak to on this. I'm just trying to figure out which phone it's in. Or maybe I'll have to go off of memory and go to our Chief Financial Officer, if that's okay. So, Mr. Miller, we've had a few conversations about the filings from the library, the difference in the presentations versus the actual audited financial statements, which are under a different set of guidelines and rules. So it's very difficult to take what's presented at council and then find the apples to apples in the financial documents on the back end, because they just don't exist. So I'm going to highlight a few things. Perhaps this is for both Ms. Gregor and also any information that can be shed to us now, because I think it'll actually save us time later on this evening, and it's a more open flow format here. The concerns that I saw were, it appears that each year the library has a set number for materials purchasing, and then at the end of the year, it's much higher, the expenses related. And I'm going on memory because again, it's sitting on my desk and not in here. Oh, looks like I'm getting help here. I think I did something wrong with your phone here. To put in perspective, in 2022, based on the year-end financials, there was a budget projection of $323,591 on materials and supplies. There was an actual of $990,496. And I'm just wondering, when we're looking at these budgets and the projections, Mr. Miller, do they create these publicly audited statements in advance as a projection and then measure against it throughout the year, or is it put together at the end of the year?
Through you, Chairman Thompson, I guess, to the mayor. So as you pointed out, you're referring to the audited public sector accounting board standard audit financial statements. What I would caution you is that there is the difference between, as you know, cash flow budgeting that municipalities do. So the statements as they're presented may not line exactly as the budget was approved for various adjustments that are made. But for the most part, what you just quoted was correct. That material line, the budget was 323 and they had 990,000 applied against it. Without doing a little further investigating, I would caution that the budgeted numbers aren't audited. It's the actual. So those actuals are real.
So Mr. Miller, because you plan a pretty big budget.
Mhm.
What's the budget number for here? With relation to this 336,000 or sorry, 323,000.
So again,
like
this is,
did they pull that out of thin air? Is that, you know what I mean? Like it's because it's not done in the same format as the presentation that's brought before us, even inside of this financial statement. So we've got a presentation that says broadly, this is what we want to do, which is a much higher number on materials and supplies. Then we've got this internal projection, it looks like. And then after that, we've got the result. And it's difficult to make heads or tails on how these are the same things or even close to the same things.
yeah, no, it's through you, Chairman Thompson. So you're absolutely right. And that's one of the challenges. These are PSAP statements. So for example, there are non-cash items recorded to these accounts, prepaid expenses. Those prepaid expenses, when municipalities budget, we do it on a cash basis. So you wouldn't actually have that prepaid expense. You might have paid for it 2 years ago, but it gets recorded as an expense that year that it was applied because it's prepaid over time. So those numbers won't align for that reason. There's a reconciliation that needs to be done. So we almost need to start with their budget that was approved, look at the actuals as the city does when we do our presentation. We speak to the budgeted year-end number. And then when you get our audited financial statements, I'm sure this committee actually received them this year. You'll probably remember the presentation where we actually walk you through, this is where we cash flow budget, and this is how we get to our end budget. So there are items in here that are non-cash that they didn't budget. So we have to reconcile that to be able to answer your questions. What I can say is it's audited. The actuals represent true costs for that year. They just may not align to the cash flow expense in that year.
Okay, one other question for you, and then I think I would like to maybe give a little bit of direction now, if I could, or feedback, not direction, to our auditor, Eyal. And when something that you brought to my attention earlier, because I was really trying to understand this. So there's 6,050,000 that was into salaries and benefits, of which about 5.466656 million was spent in 22 at the library. There's additionally later on in the financial statements about $1 million into prepaid future expenses related to benefits, retirement, etc. Can you just confirm that for me?
So through you, Chairman Thompson, to the mayor, yes, if you look on the statements, you're looking at salaries and benefits, and it has numbers notes 3 and 6. So there are notes on page 10 to explain that there are adjustments made for example, post-period benefit costs. So each year actuaries look at how much in the future today's payroll will be required to fund for vacations and that sort of thing, and it's discounted back. And every year there's an adjustment made on that. Municipalities don't budget for that in the year. So there's the numbers you're looking at on the audited statements will be different from what is budgeted in their cash flow. So there are a number of adjustments in there that will often inflate it higher because it's capturing the future year's costs and allocating portion to 2022 in this case.
Okay, thank you. I'll just maybe shed a little bit more light on where I'm sitting on this. There was, and we don't have the 2023 information. I asked for projected 2023 statements based on what we had year to date. We didn't receive those in the last week. There was 9.875 million in 2022 at December 31st in revenue. Of that, we had 9.317 million that was spent. There was an annual surplus at the end of 2022 of $557,331. The previous year, that surplus was 861,004. The previous year before that, it was 700 and some odd $1,000. It was a total of 2.17 million. I'm going off, memory here because I don't have these notes in front of me. Over the last 3 years in surpluses. And what I didn't understand was if the account, which is a reserve account, is set at, I think it's 2.7 million-ish that's sitting in that account, and it had a starting balance, and they sent out all of the debits from the reserve account. How the status of it was what it is today, because it felt like there was, to me, dollars and cents that I couldn't pin where they were and what they were doing. And in conversations with Mr. Miller today and some of the replies we had from the library in the last 24 hours, there's an accumulated surplus, which is, for my lack of understanding on this, is sitting inside of City Hall in one of our accounts, but in the back end is recovered by the library through internal accounting software, etc. So there's 2.7 million sitting in a reserve account. There's an additional, we don't know the exact, I think it was the last measure was about 600 and some odd $1,000 that was sitting in the accumulated surplus on top of the $2.7 million that was in the reserve account. And my concern related to this, and I think everyone's got a varying degree of concern, whether it's process on how to properly account for these dollars or on process related to how much should be kept by the library and then returned. But the policy and process piece here, I think, is where I would like some feedback, where I would like some direction when comparing it with other service partners or other maybe policies internally to the City of Barrie. And the final piece for me that I find very difficult, and I'm struggling to understand, so I await the information. I'm not going to jump to a conclusion prior to having that information, is that 2 weeks ago tonight, I believe, we had presentations which outlined the budget requests. And if we remember the budget requests, there was not enough dollars inside the budget request in order to fulfill the materials request. And so members of council, some said, well, you've decided to go down the road of a support worker instead of the materials. And other members of council said, no, we need to add that back in, right? And I respect both of those positions. Like, I honestly do. What concerns me is an accumulated surplus in excess of the $2.7 million that we can guess is somewhere between 650, maybe 350 and $650,000. That was actually in excess of the amount that either was removed or the request overall. Meaning, in one way or another, the money was already sitting in the bank account, but we're being told we don't have any money and we're going to cut materials and we're going to cut services. And that conversation for me is what triggers me to go, we need to find out whether that money is actually there, in the sense that if it was available to be used to cover these additional services and materials, why was council told that these services would be cut because there was no money? That is a public trust piece that we need to figure out. And if it's just comes down to an accounting question of how you account for it in one set of financial statements, how you account for it in a public presentation, and how it's understood by individuals on the board or individuals around this table, rightly or wrongly, self-included. That's one thing. But if it was understood and then brought forward in a light, I start to have real questions about how we're going to act as a council towards that request. So I'll leave it there. I know I've spoken for far longer than I planned to. I was actually waiting for this evening to speak to this. But I certainly support the direction.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Any members of non-committee, any questions? Councilor Reba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure who I should ask this question to, but let me say, first of all, I think each one of us around this table very much supports the library. And frankly, if they need $78,000 in order to buy enough books for this coming year, I think we'll all probably say, yes, they should have it. But I think over this past week, with the dozens of emails that have been going back and forth and the numbers flying around, I don't know that we as a council have sufficient information to really hone in on what exactly the numbers ought to be. And that concerns me greatly. And I wanted to ask you, Councillor Harvey, if this amendment passes and you're aware of, a series of motions that are coming forward or proposed to come forward at council tonight regarding this similar situation, if this passes, do we need any of those other motions in your view? Because it seems to me that if our audit does what we're hoping it will do, I'm kind of thinking we don't need to discuss any further the various amendments that were put forward. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Thompson. This is more of an opinion question, and so I'm not quite sure what really this has to do with the motion as to how much my opinion really matters, to be quite honest with you. I'll be quite honest with you, I haven't seen, other than what you had sent me, I'm not aware of other motions that are going to be even considered pertaining to the library. The reason this was brought forward now is specifically because the Q4 audit report was coming through with her 2024 audit plan. And that's why it was being added at this point, because I pondered that too, as to whether now was the appropriate time or whether council was the appropriate time. But after speaking with staff, this was the appropriate time to be adding it into the 2024 audit plan.
Mr. Chairman, I think that makes good sense myself. And I think that if, for my thinking, it may shorten our discussion later on tonight.
Any other members? Non-members, sorry.
Well, I do have a motion for this evening, and obviously I will get further clarification after this meeting ends to make sure if I choose to move forward with that motion as written. So that's, I guess, all I really have to say about that. I will speak to staff about that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, just to so everyone's clear. The process that we're going to go through tonight is in advance of the process that we're going through right now, in the sense that it feels like the one that we're going through right now is preventative of later conversations. That's actually not accurate, Councillor Corser, because this process is behind the city council meeting on the approval of the budget. So I just want to point that out so we all are working on the same information.
If I may, it just seems that the conversations that are happening now, as I absorb it, are conversations that should be maybe not at this committee and at council later on, because it kind of blurs the lines between two different things to me. So we're going to be having these conversations later. So it kind of is a bit of a rollover in my mind. So I just want to get clear on process and what we're doing with the library budget as we decide with the library budget later on this evening. So I will just leave it
Yeah,
there.
so just a little bit of clarity into your question where we're going. So this is just to add the scope of work for the 2024 audit plan. Just the discussion was people in support of the amendment to the motion. So it's actually not a discussion on the budget portion. It's just on Councillor Harvey's amendment. So people added why they support it, but this is just to add to the auditor's working plan for 2024. So everything, it can still move forward with the budget as members of council feel fit. Anybody else? Non-members?
I have a motion for 2025. So that's mine.
Okay, on the amendment, all in favor? It carries. I will give the chair back to Councillor Harvey.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mayor Nuttall.
May I speak to the main motion?
Definitely, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say thank you to our audit team and for the very direct information and the very detailed work. I think that it helps us know, and hopefully we share that with the city, that, you know, every dollar, even of fuel, right, is paid attention to and is being watched. And I just want to say, like, it was a very detailed report. Thank you for the work. It was very encouraging. And there's lots of opportunity to do better, and there's lots of successes you identified as well. So just really want to say thank you to you and the team for that.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. Is there any other members of committee? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Through you, Chair Harvey, first I will go to CAO Prowse. And it's more of a, I guess, an operational thing. In the report, there was a lot of recommendations, and I'll echo Mayor Nuttall's comments that it was a very thorough report with no fraud or anything, but there was a lot of recommendations to basically tighten it up to avoid that from happening or to monitor it moving forward. Would there be required motion from this committee, or is that something that's just operational that would occur on the recommendations of the auditor?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. No, Deputy Mayor Thompson, we don't require additional direction from this committee. And I would certainly, echo your and the mayor's comments, regarding the transparency and scrutiny that the organization itself actually embraces. As members of committee will note, that the audit that was done, the fuel card review, was actually initiated by management. They had requested it. They certainly have embraced the recommendations. And I'm sure that Ms. McGregor will report back in no short order that they have been put in place. Should we need additional direction or resources, we will certainly report back to this committee on those.
Perfect. And just to follow up, and I'll let you direct this wherever, and in more of our operations center, as we're going through a transition with that and a new development, has there ever been a consideration of taking on our own fuel pumps as a kind of a checks and balances. I know there's more environmental stuff, but not sourcing it out through other providers and stuff. I know a lot of municipalities have their own fuel.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. Yeah, we have looked into that. Sorry, I wasn't sure what your question.
No, just looking at the audit report, there was, we have providers and stations and card locks and stuff. And I was just wondering if we had ever considered by bringing the fuel in-house at the ops center in regards to not having third party or just as we are doing some work in the ops center, because it would take, you know, some construction and stuff to.
Yeah, through you, Chair Harvey, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. We did look at it and we didn't move on that for cost reasons.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anyone else on committee or non-members that would like to speak to the main motion? No. Again, I would like to thank Ms. McGregor for all the time she spent with me this afternoon going through this. And as was mentioned, it is a very detailed report and with probably the most recommendations I've seen on one of the quarterly reports when it comes to looking at the avenues that were explored, especially when it comes to the fuel card pieces out. So thank you to you and your team for all your continued work. With that, I will call the vote on the main motion as amended. All those in favor, and that passes. Now, due to time and the fact that there's still a few items here and we still have the closed session where we do have some parties waiting for us in regards to the closed session. I'm going to ask if a member could refer the remaining items for discussion to our next meeting, which is going to be at the beginning of February. So it's only a short delay on those items. So that way we can still accomplish everything tonight without pushing council too late.
I move to defer them to the next meeting if it's okay with the movers of the motion.
I'm not seeing 8.2 has any time sensitivity, so that's fine. I know heritage is an ongoing conversation. I'm on that committee. I'm not sure if Councillor Rietma has an opinion, but I think that's, I don't think that has any harm to next steps from a strategy. So that's fine to defer.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I do agree, like none of it seems to be time sensitive, or obviously we would be able to try and squeeze one of them in. So I could, if I could have someone refer them. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. And obviously it's a referral motion, so there's no conversation or debate around it. All those in favor? And that passes. Now we'll go back to the one item that I and can I have a member of committee put a motion on the floor for us to go into closed session? Thank you, Councillor Kungle. The committee will now move into closed session to discuss a referral motion concerning the confidential circulation correspondence regarding the confidential potential land disposition matter, Dunlop Street area. Members of the public are excused from this portion of the meeting, and we will now move to the Sir Robert Barrie room. Do we need to vote on that too? And actually, I forgot to call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you.